السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the days and the nights of Ramadan for everyone blessed with the Quran, with the fasting, with the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make it a month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us, and guide us, and accept from all of us the good deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll go briefly through some the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade in the 8th juz number 8, which is basically half of it in Surah Al-An'am and half of it in Surah Al-A'raf. And it starts with ayah number 111 from Surah Al-An'am. وَلَوْ أَنَّنَا نَزَّلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. And as we know that, again, as far as the direct orders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's not many, but it's about what we get from the verses can be a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form of showing what is good versus what is evil, verses that talks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, for example, the first ayah, which is 111. We need to observe in it the fact that everything is by the will of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeated that in Surah Al-An'am. وَمَا كَانُوا لِيُؤْمِنُوا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. They are not to believe except by the will of Allah. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ مَا فَعَلُوا. If your Lord will, they would never be able to do it. So it's basically to establish the tawheed of Allah. You have to observe that command of Allah, that you need to worship Him alone in all what that means, with all of the acts of worship, and to detach with your heart from anything that is being worshipped, anything that people get their hearts attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the acts of the disbelievers, guidance, everything is in the hands of Allah. So, and it's always the way of the Quran makes or put things in the right perspective. So whoever does evil on the face of earth, the Quran, the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala direct you to see that it's in your heart. It is not really, they are doing it, of course, they're responsible for their actions, but your heart is not looking at this, right? The heart meaning that you're witnessing the actions of Allah, so that you don't get terrified by other than Allah, so that your heart is not attached to other than Allah. And why? Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, they won't be able to do what they're doing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for it to happen. If a person intended evil, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, that person would not be able to do the evil. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them to do this for the trials and the tests in this life. So then who you're supposed to witness with your heart? The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for it to happen. So that means you reflect upon yourself, what is then for me to do? What do we need to do as a result of this? To be obedient to Allah, to stay away from what is evil, and things like this. When the Quran informs us about what's beyond what we see apparently with our own eyes, like the enmity of the shayateen and the devils of the human beings and the jinn, and how they adorn the evil to one another, right? And it's something that is hidden from us. When you know that people are plotting against you, and when they plot, they don't openly say that they're plotting, otherwise it's not a plot. And the shaitan is doing the same thing, and he is hidden from us, and shayateen of human beings and jinn. So what happens if a person doesn't have the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He have the fear of other than Allah? No. The next ayah number 112, again repeating the same thing, when it mentioned that for every prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for that prophet, for every prophet, enemies. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا. This is how we made. لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ. For every prophet, عَدُوًا. Enemy. شَيَاطِينَ الْإِنسِ وَالْجِنِّ. The shayateen of the human beings and the jinn. يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا. They inspire one another with the adornment of the speech. This is how they deceive each other. But then listen to what says right after that. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ مَا فَعَلُوا. And if your Lord will, they would not be able to do it. This is what is meant here. So what is the command of Allah? Don't worry about what they are doing. Don't worry with your heart what they are plotting, because if your Lord will, they would never be able to do it. And see how the ayah ended? فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. ذَرْهُمْ, that means leave them. Leave them and what they are making of their lies and this adornment of the speech. Leave them. Turn away from them. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how the iman get established in the heart, by obeying the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us by saying, فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ, leave them and what they make of lies. That means we have to leave them and what they make with lies. We leave them, we turn away from them. We don't get so much concerned or so much worried about it. You fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, right? And that means what, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he says, دَعْ أَذَاهُمْ, turn away from their harm or whatever, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their enmity that is coming from them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will suffice for you. فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. After that, it's, you can extract from every verse basically a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we take as a judge, and He's the one that we refer to and return to in matters of judgment and rulings. أَفَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ أَبْتَغِي حَكَمًا, verse number 114. Is it other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I take as a judge? The answer is no. While He is the one, وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكِتَابَ مُفَصَّلًا, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down to you the book, مُفَصَّلًا, in so much details. And the people of the book, وَالَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ مُنَزَّلٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ بِالْحَقِّ فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ. They know that what we had revealed to you is the haqq, is the truth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we take as a judge in all of our disputes from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbidding us from obeying anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it's something that is make you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In verse number 116, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you obey most of the people on the face of earth, they would deviate you from the path of Allah. Why? Look at what the human beings are, and no one will inform you of the human beings better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. Because they are basically follow nothing but الظن, conjunctures, thinkings, opinions that has no basis to it. And they do nothing but lie. Human beings, when they're left on their own, they would just lie when it comes to the haqq, the truth, versus falsehood. They lie. And this is most of the human beings like this. So therefore what? That means follow the wahy revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again. So don't make yourself obey people. Don't listen to people that they don't talk based on the wahy from Allah. We're not talking about listening to people of how to manufacture a car or how to write a computer program. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the perceptions, and of course matters of deen, aqidah, matters of akhlaq, matters of ibadah, matters of goodness, what is good and what is bad, and so on. We have what is sufficient for us in the book of Allah and in the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Then the verses when it talked about to eat from what the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is said or pronounced with regards to the meat and what's slaughtered and so on. Then there's few verses talks about this, and this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you make sure that you don't eat the meat from animals that just died like that, or without being slaughtered and without the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being mentioned on it. And this is the general rule. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for the believers to eat from the meat of the people of the book, but with the same conditions, that it's slaughtered is not just shot, for example, or suffocated or something like this. There is a clear command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to leave the sins, whether it's openly or secretly or clear or not clear, everything. ظاهر الإثم وباطنه, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in ayah number 120, وَذَرُوا ظَاهِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَبَاطِنَهُ. So leave the sin, whether it's openly or secretly. Leave all sins. And the warning comes as a result of that. And do not eat again from the meat of that is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not mentioned upon it. Al-makr or plotting is evil and it's forbidden. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned because those who would plot in any place, there's always plotters, those who would plot against the truth. And they're basically plotting against themselves because at the end, they are the ones that would suffer from their own plot. The verses also talks about the fact that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guidance for someone, he would open his heart for the deen of al-Islam. So that means come forward to the deen of al-Islam. Take the means and the steps to learn the deen, to be upon the deen so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open your heart to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to follow as-salat al-mustaqim, the straight path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the people to follow. The verses when it talks about the hereafter also makes us clear of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us in this life and how again, it's mentioned the relationship between the jinn and the human beings in verse number 128 and how they would distance themselves from others in the day of judgment and how the zalimeen, the wrongdoers, they become against one another and they because of their evil actions. Also, in the verses, there is a command, but it's not for people to do, but rather as a warning. In ayah number 134 or 35, قُلْ يَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانَتِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ. O my people, act, which is عَمَلُوا, right? But act. The ayah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering the Prophet ﷺ to address the disbelievers, saying, O my people, work according to your way. Surely I am working in my way. So it's not that he's approving what they're doing, saying after inviting them to the truth, and if they continue, then continue to do what you're doing. It's like when you say to someone, do whatever you want, because I already made it clear to you what's the consequences of your actions. So, that you will see what the outcome of things. How the disbelievers, they associated partners with Allah and they slaughtered for other than Allah. And they would even invent their own rulings. So they would make some for their idols and some for themselves, as it's also mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, all invented lies about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, the verses talked about how the mushrikeen, they would kill their own sons and daughters, or mainly the daughters, and how it's adorned to them, this evil action, as a warning for us that don't be deceived with what makes sense to you or what looks nice or looks good. We can be easily deceived. And you can see that with how human beings are and how the previous verses that talks about زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا. People can make their speech in such a way that will make you like what is evil and think good about what's evil. So to be protected from this, hold fast to the book of Allah. Because the people of Quraysh, they would kill their daughters when they're born, and they would think that this is a good thing because they are the daughters of Allah or the angels or whatever there is. So it's people, human beings, they have this tendency of doing whatever they want of evil, and they would justify it for themselves. So be warned against this, and don't let anyone confuse you with matters of the religion, as it's stated in 137. And also the ayah says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا فَعَلُوا. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, they would never have done that. So again, فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. Leave them and what they are making of lies about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the verse talks about this with matters of tawheed and how they associate partners with Allah and their slaughter and things like this. And also with those who kill their children when they're young. And the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in 141 with regards to give the zakah, with regards to the things that are cultivated, and forbidding us from making israf or excessiveness. When there's a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for people to eat what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for them, it doesn't mean that they have to eat. It's just a command to show that it's permissible. This is eat from what is lawful, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Do not follow the steps of shaitan, and we talked about that before. The animals and the the livestock and things like that is mentioned because, again, the issue of slaughtering to other than Allah, this is shirk. And the disbelievers are used to do that. So these verses are mentioned. And then there is the verse which is number 145, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated what is haram for people to eat when the animal is killed, the gushing blood, the swine flesh of the swine, and anything that is being slaughtered to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the verses talks about the nations before, like the Jews, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade for them as a result of their aggression. So before the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, the haram was for the people of Bani Israel. Some of it was a punishment for them. But for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, this is not the case. What's haram is not to punish the ummah, but rather the haram for this ummah is what's impure is forbidden. So it's as a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this ummah with regards to anything that is forbidden. So this was the ease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for this ummah. It's haram to rely upon the qadr by doing evil and saying that's the qadr of Allah, because that's the way of the mushrikeen, as it's mentioned in 148. Also that do not witness with them with regards to what is they consider as haram. Those who would say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something and He didn't forbade it, and they would, you challenge them, you bring their witnesses, and what they made of a haram from their own desires is not from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the verses like 151 that talks and afterwards talks about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, shirk, associating partners with Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanding the believers to be kind to their parents, not to kill their children, and don't worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for you and for them. Do not come close to the fawahish. It doesn't say do not do the fawahish or the evil sins. It says do not come close to it, whether it's openly or inwardly, secretly, or done openly. And do not shed blood, do not kill anyone, and do not come close, do not approach the wealth of the orphan, except with what is good if you're the guardian. Fulfill the balance and matters of transactions and covenants. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these things is in one's capacity. And if you say, then be just and be fair. So if you speak about something, if you speak about someone, be fair. Do not be unjust. And you will be questioned about that, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us. Even if it's someone that is close to you, even if it's someone that you love, be fair. And by the covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fulfill. And to follow the straight path. وَأَنَّ هَذَا صَلَاتِ مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ. This is my straight path, so follow it. As the Prophet ﷺ, when he draw a line, straight line, and then from that line, other lines coming from it on the sides and both sides, and he said, this is the salah, this is the straight path, and these are subul, these are paths. On the top of every path, there's a shaitan calling people to it. Then he quoted the ayah to follow the straight path, and don't follow these subul, don't follow these paths, otherwise it disperse you away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the clear command from Allah to follow the book of Allah. Verse number 155, وَهَذَا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مُبَارَكٌ فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَاتَّقُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. This is a blessed book that Allah brought it down, the Quran, so follow it. It's not brought down for you to just seek blessings from it, but to follow it and to fear Allah. وَاتَّقُوا, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have mercy upon you. And don't imitate the ways of the disbelievers when they talk about turning away from the truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. And that's why lying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worst thing that can a person do is to lie about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is again forbidden, and that's the roots of the innovations in the deen and things like this. Also, we are commanded to believe in al-Iman in the proper way, and al-Iman, faith, increases and decreases, increases with the good deeds and decreases with the bad deeds. And ayah number 158, when it talks about the signs of Allah, the major signs of the hour, when the sun rises from the west, where no actions will be accepted, or no one, if a person is a disbeliever, his iman is not going to be accepted. And if a person is a mu'min, there are no more deeds to be accepted. That's it. That's the end of their actions. And the ayah clearly state this. And what's mentioned is al-iman, so that means it shows that al-iman actions is part of one's iman and one's actions. The encouragement to do good deeds, the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do good deeds, the forbidding this ummah from dispersing in matters of religion, disuniting oneself because of the religion by those who would invent things about the religion. And that's the qadr of Allah, but you are not supposed to do that by holding fast to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no partners. The end of the surah ends with clear instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the establishment of the Tawheed, and everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swift in punishment, and He's the most forgiver, the most merciful. Then after that, Surah Al-A'raf, that has many different things in it, and it shows the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, from the nations that are mentioned, and the story of Musa alayhi salam. It's all the applications of what's mentioned in the previous surahs. But one of the very clear commands in the very beginning of the surah, forbidding the Prophet ﷺ and the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ from having any unease in their hearts with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the truth. If people do not have it, if they disbelieve in it, if they think that this is not the right thing because they basically fooling themselves, it should not prevent you from saying the truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. And the command from Allah in the third verse, اتَّبِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكُم مِّن رَبِّكُم. Follow what Allah brought down to you. And do not وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا مِن دُونِ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Do not follow other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, how to establish this? Look at the nations before. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them when they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything will be judged by the most just subhanahu wa ta'ala. The story of Adam alayhi salam and the angels, and it's clearly stated the origin of the creation of the human beings and the enmity of shaitan, and the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Adam alayhi salam not to disobey Allah, not to come close to the tree, and the shaitan, how he whispered to them and he made them eat from it when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade them from this. And as a result of that, they came down onto the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted the repentance of Adam alayhi salam and his wife, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly commanded Adam and the sons of Adam, and showing them that even with what Allah bestowed upon them, like the clothing and so on, وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ, verse number 26, that the garment of taqwa is what is best. And it's always whenever there's physical provisions that people seek, you would find that taqwa is mentioned, because that's what really matters, and it doesn't undermine the fact that they need to take the physical means, but to direct them to what is best is the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after mentioning what happened to Adam from shaitan, then calling all the sons of Adam to not be deceived and deviated by the shaitan, the one that took your fathers out of Jannah, because that's what he's going to try to do, the same thing for you. But this time, whoever is not in Jannah, they're not going to the earth again, they will go to the hellfire. So when the believers, they go back to Jannah, they're going back home. Right? They were out of Jannah, and they need to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah to go back to their original place. But if they disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the warning comes in place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never ordered the people to do fahsha. Those who are upon fahsha and they claim or they think that this is by Allah, like you'd find even people nowadays, they say whatever evil actions that they're upon, they say God is love, is about love, and this and that. So they would allow the most evil actions in the name of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is love and things like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not command people to do fahsha and to do evil actions. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded people to be just and to bring yourself into the masajid. وَأَقِيمُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ, as in verse number 29. Go to the houses of Allah and invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincerity, because people will be either a guided group or a misguided ones. And the misguided ones, they took the shayateen as awliya, as helpers and supporters besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they think that they're guided. Also, the command of Allah to adorn oneself when you come to the masjid, meaning that you don't respect the masjid, respect and honor the houses of Allah, and it's basically because of the mushrikeen. They used to come to the house of Allah in the Kaaba and make tawaf without clothes on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the believers to put their zina, and the zina here is basically the garments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adorned the human beings by making them wear garments to cover their awrah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade al-fawahish, as it's mentioned in verse number 33. Again, ma ظهر منها وبطن is repeated again. What's openly done, what's secretly, and the sins, major sins, minor sins, transgression, to disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, associate partners with Allah, and to say about Allah without knowledge, and the orders of it goes from the least to the worst of sins. Also the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for people to have the taqwa of Allah, to rectify, to be righteous. And these are the people, there is no fear for them, nor shall they grieve. And showing again those who deny the truth, they will be among the people of the hellfire. And then when the verses talks about what's going to happen in the day of judgment, it shows that those who entered the Jannah is by the mercy of Allah, and those who entered the hellfire is by the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how the nations will curse one another. Those who they used to be so proud of their forefathers and so on, and they would lead one another to the hellfire, they would curse one another in the day of judgment. Because of their criminal actions and their evil actions and things like this. Also, the verses talks about that we should not have any hatred or grudges inside, because this will be removed from the hearts of the people before they enter Jannah. No one would enter Jannah with any grudges inside towards anyone. So if you can clear it and purify it in this life, it's best for you. Otherwise, it's going to have to be something done in the day of judgment so that people would purify themselves from these even grudges that was not even in the level of sin. So you can imagine if it's a sinful one. The sinful act of blocking people away from knowing the truth, and they would deceive people. And this is whether it's with matters of iman and kufr, faith and disbelief, or in evil actions, deceiving people, adorning the evil to the people. The importance of doing as much as good deeds as a person can, because the people of Al-A'raf, they're the ones that their good deeds are equal exactly to the bad deeds, so they will be in a place between the Jannah and the hellfire. So this is in itself is a command from Allah to do the good deeds and never to belittle a good deed. One hasana might be the reason for the person to be saved by it. So never belittle any other actions of Allah, and forbidding al-kibr or arrogance. And it's so amazing also verse number 50 in Surah Al-A'raf, how that the people of the hellfire, when they called upon the people of Jannah to pour onto them from the water or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for them, what do the people of Jannah reply to them is very interesting. It says, قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَهُمَا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. That in the day of judgment, Allah forbade on the kafirin, those who are in the hellfire, the water or what Allah provided for the people in Jannah. So it becomes haram for them. So it's basically what you do here in this world. If you transgress the limits and you take what is forbidden, then it becomes forbidden for you in the day of judgment when it becomes permissible for others. So the same thing, for example, for those who do not drink wine and intoxications in this world, when they enter Jannah, they will have the best khamr, that it doesn't intoxicate. But if someone drank it in this life, unless he repents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be deprived from it in the day of judgment. And warning those who would take their religion as mockery. And this is how the disbelievers are. They take their religion as a mockery, a play, amusement. They're deceived by this dunya. They don't take their religion serious because it's a fake religion. It's not true. So how can the people of the truth follow them the way they deal with the deen of Allah? So that means warning against taking the religion lightly or making mockery. Of course, making mockery is a act of disbelief, of course. So, and that's how they led themselves to the hellfire. There's a very important verses. All of the verses are important to invoke Allah, to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with tadarru', with so much being in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't transgress in your dua. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayah, ud'u rabbakum tadarru'an wa khufya innahu la yuhibbul mu'tadin, verse number 55. basically to humble yourself when you're making dua, like وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ فِي نَفْسِكَ تَضَرُّعًا وَخِيفًا, as it's going to be mentioned in the surah. When the Sahaba, they raised their voice in their dua, the Prophet ﷺ said, "O people, أربعوا على أنفسكم, take it easy on yourself. You're not invoking فإنكم لا تدعون أصم ولا غائبا. You're not invoking someone that is deaf or not present. The one that you're invoking and making dua to is سميع قريب. He hears you and he's very near to you. So turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the dua and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are in a month where we need to make lots of dua. But then the next ayah, وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. Very serious command from Allah, which means do not spread corruption, do not corrupt on the face of earth after it's been rectified. Inna rahmat, and invoke وَدْعُوهُ خَوْفًا وَطَمْعًا, and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with fear and hope. Inna rahmatallahi qareebun muhsinin. Indeed, the mercy of Allah is near to the muhsinin, to the good doers. Right? So, and reflect upon this verse. The earth was upon uprightness and goodness, and then the corruption came from the human beings. So bring it back to how it was. And the same thing if you are in a place where the Sahaba radiallahu anhum came and they liberated that land from the evil and the shirk and the disobedience to Allah, and the land was rectified and was upright by the deen of Allah, and then Muslims afterwards corrupt that land again with evil and aggression and things like this, you ought not to do that. So وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. And وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, do not corrupt on the face of earth with sins after it's been made the islah of it, when it's rectified, when it's upright with at-ta'at. So al-ma'asi, sins, corrupts the lands, and good deeds purifies the land. So if you want to purify a land that you're in, your homes, your masajid, your whatever, is to rectify it with acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's, for example, in our masajid needs to be occupied with acts of obedience to Allah, not with disputes and evil actions and things like this. The same thing with our homes. These are the places where if we should have control over it by the will of Allah, we should occupy it with acts of obedience to Allah. Salah, ibadah, dhikr, and not sins. Otherwise it corrupts. We make corruption on the face of earth as a result of this. Then after that, the stories of Nuh alayhi salam and the people of Ad and the people of Thamud and the people of Madian, and before that the people of Lut, and all of them, they were commanded to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and we are the same thing. And those who disobeyed their messengers, the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to them. And the people of Lut and the acts of the people of the Lut was the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his wrath upon them, for people to stay away from these evil actions. And then the people of Madian, how they were forbidden from cheating the balances and cutting the roads on the people, and of course associating partners with Allah. And this is how the juz ends, with the story of the people of Madian and Shu'aib, and how he addressed his people in a very eloquent way, as he was known to be Khatibul Anbiya, and how they returned that with ignorance, and as a result of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are followers of the book of Allah, and to humble ourselves to the deen of Allah. طيب, barakallah fikum. We'll leave you here inshallah because of the time of Maghrib for you guys. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasting and accept your dua before breaking your fast inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.